You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 76 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. I have some advice for government entities out there. When Jessica Szilagyi shows up, just give her whatever she wants.
The keys will do.
It would be a lot easier than waiting for the storm that follows you.
It's true. Like, I hate to be all, comply or die, but that's kind of where we're at.
Well, and you said you have a municipality that takes, they'll put you in an air-conditioned room and give you whatever you want and all that stuff, and you gave them a cookie.
I did. And I think people took note of that because I have had a couple people reach out and say that they have seen something I've written about transparency, or it made them see it a little bit different perspective. And I don't know if they're just sucking up or if they honestly believe that. I don't really care as long as I get my records, but there are a few places where it's just still a constant battle. And I just don't understand. It's like they've never in their entire lives had anyone ask any question about anything ever. And it's just the most offensive thing.
I kind of liken it to coming home with a bad report card. Not that you would know anything about that.
No.
But when I was a kid, I rode my bicycle to school.
Was it uphill both ways? It
was uphill both ways. And it was one of those bicycles with one of the giant wheels on front. Mm-hmm. But that was the longest ride home. I took every detour, take as much time as possible before coming home with a report card that didn't have good grades on it. Same thing. It's going to come out. It's not like you're going to go, okay, you win.
I've never given up because someone's made it difficult. And my personality is that even there's been plenty of times when, the avenue that I'm trying doesn't work. And so I'll find another alternative route to get what I need in the meantime. But I'll still pursue what I did because I don't want them to get away with intimidating someone away. Because the next time it might be citizens who need something, and I want them to remember that someone will come in and bust their balls. And I think you mentioned that I gave someone a cookie, and yes, I did. And everybody remarked about that, oh, look how nice she'll be when, you comply with the law. But there was I think we even talked about it on the show, but there was last year this huge scandal with Oak Park, and it was found that the clerk hadn't paid payroll taxes and had the city in hundreds of thousands of debt, or thousands of dollars in debt, which is a big deal to a town that size. And it had been months of her fighting me on records and her giving me partial documents or documents that weren't all the way correct. And finally, on this payroll tax thing, she called me on a Sunday and was like, look, I totally messed up. This is what happened. And these are the documents. I will give you everything, but I have royally screwed up. And I just wanted to let you know before you found it out, in open records or whatever. And I didn't let her off the hook, but I definitely changed the tone of my article. And the headline was that she was apologizing for her mistake and was going to move on from the job instead of being a scandal, if that makes sense. So honesty, and people were more forgiving of it because she was upfront about it. People in government, I think, have moved past that and totally forgotten that sometimes it's best to just say, I screwed up and I'm sorry.
Well, the cover-up is always worse than the crime.
Always.
And I go back to Nixon, and there's very highly unlikely that Nixon had anything to do with the Whitewater break-in. It would have been beneath his level, his purview. It was the cover-up. The cover-up was the crime. Mm-hmm. If you had a couple staffers do something stupid, you fire them, you stand up and say, I won't tolerate that in my organization. You can them and you move on. But when you cover it up, Plus, that's when you change the tone of your article, you go from absolutely skewering somebody to like, well, maybe she wasn't the right person for the job, but she knows that she screwed up and she's sorry, and you know, she's not a bad person, she's just incompetent.
Right. And you know what? That's okay. Like, we all know, we've all done jobs that we're not good at, and it's unfortunate that you get, you know, blasted in the media, but you still did it. But I've mentioned it before, but I get tired of fighting all of the time. Like, sometimes it's exciting, and like I know that someone's going to screw up and I'm going to have the opportunity to nail their behind to the wall. But other times it's like, come on, just try to do things the right way.
You know, that's the thing that I see in my little area of the world is if you just try. If
you try and mess up, it's still going to be 100 times better than if you fought it the entire time.
I like the story you had last week of the councilman who abstained physically but not emotionally.
Close. So there's a big, I think I've mentioned it too. We talked about briefly a landfill that's coming to, or trying to come to, a community down here, and they wanted to put a moratorium in because, shocker, all of their ordinances are out of date. Well, they all had this 20-minute conversation in a commission meeting, and it turns out that what was recorded as a unanimous vote was not unanimous, that one of the commissioners didn't vote. And you are like legally required to vote if you're present. You're supposed to. Robert Rules of Order says it. ACCG says it. You're supposed to vote either yay or nay. If you abstain, it's supposed to be because you have a conflict of interest and you're supposed to announce it. Well, this guy didn't. And his wife was in a group, and she totally threw him under the bus and was like, well, actually, John abstained from voting. And it's a citizens group, so I mostly just watch, but I chimed in and I'm like, oh, really? So did he have a conflict of interest? And she's like, no, absolutely not. I'm like, cool, he broke the rules. So now he's saying that he didn't actually abstain, that he just didn't raise his hand, so he physically didn't abstain, but he legally did. So I'm like, whatever that means. Like, so you voted, you legally voted for something that you're opposed to because you physically didn't want to vote for it?
Now, I don't want to get too far off in the weeds because, you know, this wasn't really in our outline. It just, as I scroll through your stuff, I'm entertained by your followers. Now, when I vote on my little unconstitutional board, once everything's done, I have to write down my vote and sign it. Say, you know, I voted to approve, sign it for post 1 and turn it in. Is that not part of pretty much everybody?
I've never seen a place do that. The only thing I've ever seen is maybe like a resolution, but that's usually signed by just the mayor and the clerk. But keeping records like that would be far too 19th century for South Georgia.
And I'm sure keeping track of 100,000 little pieces of paper would be onerous, but at least it'd be something to go back to.
Well, that's exactly what we don't want around here. So
yeah, we want to forget on the fly,
right? Or we want to be able to refute it and say, well, no, I said. That's why. I mean, we're way down the rabbit hole, but that's why people hate that I video, because they'll be like, I didn't say that, and I'm like, roll back the tapes, folks.
Oh, that's Shaggy. Wasn't me.
Right.
But I saw you. Wasn't me. But I saw it. Wasn't me.
Yes. We could do an entire episode on this kind of stuff, though. I mean.
Oh, on Shaggy? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So speaking of spankings, the Moultrie City Council recently hosted a discipline workshop to encourage parents to bring back old-fashioned ways of accountability.
This story's just weird all around. I came across this on accident, like late at night, and I thought that I was reading it wrong.
What were you looking up late at night to come across a spanking symposium?
Oh, you know, just local government stuff. No, I was looking up Board of Education related stuff, and this came up because it has to do with the underlying story here is that the school system that Moultrie, which is a city, it's Colquitt County schools, they had, I guess, a series of fights last year, and things were escalating, and they feel like the teachers don't have control over the students. So they wanted to host this forum to encourage parents to, bring back the old ways of disciplining their kids, which includes multiple things like timeout and taking away privileges and corporal punishment. And it's almost like irrelevant to me about what they advocated for or talked about. To me, it's just totally inappropriate for a city council and a city manager to be hosting a symposium on discipline.
Well,
we were talking about this before the show. Like, it was a almost packed room. It was full.
It was government that started to take the fangs out of parents' discipline, to take the teeth out of it. I know I'm with you that it shouldn't be a symposium on why you should be spanking. There should be clarity in the law with the parent to know what's over the line. And I was sitting around talking to a prosecutor, and we were talking about it. And I said something about you can't leave a mark, and he goes, "Oh, absolutely, you can leave a mark, really? as long as there's a reason for it." Now, when I say leave a mark, I don't mean knock teeth out and beat them black and blue. Right. I mean, you can't not leave a mark if you're gonna give a, oh God, this sounds so dirty, a decent spanking. I mean, my dad's name is Ray. In the 80s, he had a belt buckle with Ray studs on the back of it. And I wore Yar across my ass quite a few times.
Well, you brought up two different points that I think are important. And one is that, people are afraid of what they can and can't do. And what I found particularly odd about this city hosting this is that DFCS and some advocacy group were both present. And the city manager is who led the presentation. And one of the things he said was, if DFCS is called, they will investigate, but they may turn around and say, I agree with you. Well, as we go on through the show, I think, and from personal knowledge and seeing stories in the news, I think DFCS is exactly the reason that a lot of parents don't spank anymore or are scared to spank. And 9 times out of 10, I don't think DFCS agrees with the family, not without some sort of oversight or probationary period or investigation or just anything. So I thought it was interesting that he said that in the presence of DFCS.
And what this guy told me is there has to be, when I want to say there has to be a reason. If your kid is playing with matches and you go and you swat him on the ass, fine. But you can't just wake up every Monday morning and beat him just to remind him. And the case that he spoke about was a parent would periodically beat this child, and with the reasoning that he must have done something. That parent got in trouble.
As they should.
Right, yeah. So you can't, I used to make the joke that you get whooped on Monday morning to remind you what's going to happen the rest of the week if you screw up. But if it's a proportional response to what happened, of course, you're not going to. I think we use the word whoop and beat a little too liberally, but the proper corporal punishment has worked for millennia. Yeah, don't do that. I mean, you learn that. You learn that pretty quick. That if I act like this, I'm not going to be able to sit down for a little while.
Well, I think too. You mentioned that the government is responsible for. I don't know the exact verbiage you used, but
they're taking the teeth out away from parents.
But they've also taken the teeth away from teachers. I mean, the litigiousness of our society coupled with the government. I mean, you go to a public school today and there are a lot of classrooms where a teacher doesn't have control over what's going on and students are disrespectful and they push the limits to the limit that neither you nor I would ever dream of, because not only was I scared of getting in trouble at school, I was worried about what was going to happen at home. And another aspect is that spanking is still legal for school systems, it's just most don't do it. There are still some that do, but you used to get spanked at school.
Sure you did. Now look, here's the thing. By the time they're in high school, if you've already spared the rod, this child is spoiled. It's done. Mm-hmm. So you can't, when we talk about like high schools getting out of control, those kids are already cooked for the most part. They are what they are at that point. They're not getting whooped at home, not getting whooped at school. It's starting at elementary school age that you need to learn respect for the teachers. Right. I had a fairly rebellious youth where I was disrespectful to teachers, but not anywhere close to what these kids are. I had a debate teacher tell me to do something one day, and I talked back to her, and she said, "Don't talk back." I said, "Oh, how can you possibly teach debate if you can't even argue with a student?"
And then?
In-school suspension. I knew the in-school suspension teacher very well.
Well, and that goes, like, even in extracurricular, like, just adults in general, kids used to have a general respect for. I mean, I mouthed off to the soccer coach, and I ran laps for the entire practice, and I never mouthed off again because it was freaking miserable. I didn't have to be whooped or, punished in a severe way. It just had to be something that now it's like something like that happens, and the parents up at the field the next day complaining that their kid didn't get the right practice and had to do something that everyone else didn't. And this is excuses everywhere. But
is that because I remember running stadium tours? Mm-hmm. Oh God, I ran stadium tours.
Sucked.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a very easy form of discipline. I learned my lesson. Show up to practice on time, or you're going to run stadium tours.
Right. I just, I'm not sure. One, I obviously don't think this is the proper role of government for a municipality. Two, I'm disappointed that parents are looking to the government for advice because when has the government ever appropriately suggested something? Oh, no,
and I'm with you. I'm with you on that, but it's here. I don't have a problem with having a symposium on what is legal, what is not. What I don't like is the government going, we can't handle your kids anymore. Beat them. Because this is a direct response to another aspect, another form of government that's having problems controlling kids because, in their opinion, and probably true, parents aren't handing out the ass whipping.
But don't you think that the school system should be taking the lead on this?
Oh, sure.
On the conversation and on the implementation? I mean, the city, that's just odd.
No, it's odd. And I think you pointed out before we started recording for the show that Moultrie doesn't even have a school system. This is not City of Marietta. It's not City of Atlanta. This is a town mostly a farming community. I mean, it's cotton on the roadside, cotton in the ditch type of area. So it really would be up to, was it Colquitt County to do this? I don't know. I would much rather see this at a church. I'd rather see this at some other private community event where you do have somebody from DFCS come and talk about the difference between discipline and abuse. But you're right. No, as you know, that it's not really the City of Moultrie's job or place to do it, but I don't have a problem with parents. Obviously enough, there's enough people showing up for this thing that there are questions in their minds is what is appropriate discipline.
It frightens me that we're at a point where people have to wait until there's a government symposium to ask that as well, though. I mean, I think it just presents a whole host of problems with the system, that the school's not doing what they should do, that the parents aren't doing what they should do, that nobody's asking questions, that people are scared to act, all because of government. So government's like, hey, we're going to talk to you about, the problems we're causing.
And that brings us really, and you're right, and that ties in nicely with our next story with parents can't properly educate their children throughout the summer. Washington Post article, former high school English and social studies teacher She's now a professor at Syracuse University. But this claims that parents can't teach their kids in the summer.
So this was one of those things that it was about. The article that this appeared in was about the learning drop-off that happens in the summer, which I think, is one of the arguments that kids, or they make arguments for year-round school or different schedules so that there's a constant cycle of learning instead of having this, they say 3 months. It's really like 2 months in a week or so what the schedule is now. But so it was about, what kids lose in the summer. But the tone underlying from this Kelly Chandler Alcott was that we should leave things to experts and keep kids in school and put them in programs that are based at the school all summer long because parents aren't adequately keeping their kids on the up and up for the summer, be it through education, through, homework activities, cultural, whatever. And my whole thing is, half the problems that we see in school, going back to behavioral, is that we don't let kids be kids. And the summer is the only time that they get to let their little minds rest and to be kids and to have fun and not have obligations. Their whole lives to work during the summer. And so I was not impressed by this article.
Oh, no, I've said plenty of times a kid gets more of an education on a boat with me than they're going to in a classroom with a, in a government school.
Yeah.
Man, you're right. It's pushing the buttons, and it goes back to parenting. Moultrie's got it figured out. It goes back to parenting. If you're an involved parent, especially if you're in a 2-parent household, and you could engage your kids, they're going to learn through the summer, even if it feels like play to them. It also kills the summer job of that 15, 16-year-old who's learning work ethic. Because who's going to hire a kid for a month and a half? There's just no reason to do it. Minimum wage laws have about killed summer jobs anyway, but a kid would learn valuable life skills by becoming a courtesy clerk at Kroger, bagging groceries at Publix, collecting carts at Walmart, whatever it is. It's not about them learning their career for the rest of their lives, but learning that you get up in the morning, you go to work, you dress appropriately, how to speak to your boss, how to speak to your coworkers. And you get a real quick education in what taxes are, because I got my first paycheck and I'm like, what the hell is this?
Right.
I learned math that summer.
Well, and there's nothing I despise more. I would rather an article be outwardly biased than these undertones of putting thoughts out there that are about a specific perspective. And specifically in this one, that parents can't properly educate or maintain the intelligence of their children. I mean, the rest of us go the rest of our lives without going back to school, and we manage to do just fine. But I'd rather, this wasn't an article that appeared in, an educational magazine or something focused on teachers. This was mainstream, underlying tones of making it seem like, and I understand that depending on your socioeconomic status, like that can influence whether you go to day camp or sleepaway camp or you go visit, your rich aunt in the Amalfi Coast or something. Like, everyone has different experiences, but they tried to make it that it's imperative that schools take on summer education because of it's furthering economic divides and parents just aren't capable. And I think that that's an irresponsible position to take, because when you have people like Stacey Abrams, whose campaign platforms are dedicated to cradle to college plans where literally there is childcare options from the time, that are government based, that are from the time a child is born to the time they graduate college, and then you move on to all of the other social benefits that we have out there. Like, you're just perpetuating this narrative that we can't raise kids without government involvement to the umpteenth degree.
And it's interesting to me that a statist would certainly have that view. Now, what kills me is when I see people that put an R after their names who claim they're for small government, but they want schools to be year round because of things like crime goes up when kids are out in the summer, and other pointless things. Who will? What about childcare and everything else? And we've talked about this ad nauseum as with the 5 versus 4 day school week, and the not going back in August. Go back in September as God clearly intended. But it's funny to me that people who are claimed to be small government people all of a sudden turn into FDR when it comes to local government and school systems.
Yeah, it seems to be the exception to just about every rule that they claim to adhere to. But it's frightening. We continue to extend the school day. We change the school year. It's longer all the time. You're more time away from the family unit. And then on top of that, you want to make summer all about not only, I'm all for a work ethic, but especially these little kids, like they need that downtime to just run around and make messes and be in the dirt and
be kids.
That's right.
And be kids. And I have a friend who's moving up to 80 acres and is popping a house up, and he has been amazed how much time his kids are just outside.
Right.
Just running
doing
around.
Nothing. Yeah.
There's a side by side on the property that they'll go pile 3 kids on the side by side, just go riding around the property or fishing in a pond, or as hokey as it sounds, all that is education too. All that is child rearing too. I grow. Obviously I'm the Florida man, jeans, shorts, and all. But our summers were filled with fishing in the canals and doing stuff like that. It was learning how to interact with other kids, and then obviously I predate the social media days when we learned to deal with each other, and sometimes we fought, sometimes we we had arguments, and sometimes we got along great. But it was all outside. And we were learning the social skills that are important, that obviously I don't have, but that are important to a society. And you don't learn that sitting in a classroom, face forward, mouth shut.
No, and teaching is not for everyone. Like, I respect the teachers who are really there, quote, for the children, and they give their all to the students. Like, there are plenty of teachers who do that, but we have to get away from the narrative and the conversation that being away from your parents is what's best for you, because you already have a breakdown of, and I'm very much a traditionalist, but you already have this breakdown of the family unit because of social media and just the way that the world is operating as a whole. And the more time you take away from kids, and then if you consider the authority issues that they have problems with respect for authority, it's just a recipe for disaster in the long run.
Yeah, and it sounds hokey to say, but we've gotten away from the kitchen table.
Sure.
And what did you do today? Just a conversation around the table. I know that has broken down large part since LBJ created the Great Society. But the family unit and the kids being around the parents and having dinner with them, and it's something that I'm very proud to see with my younger brother, and I see it more because honestly it's proximity. We're 5 miles apart. We see each other a lot. We talk to each other a lot. But that's something that, and his wife is a teacher, and she's very cognizant of, we're going to sit down and eat as a family. We're going to talk as a family. We're going to go and do things outside. Now, being a teacher does afford her that time in the summertime that a single working mom might not have.
Well, and that's another thing is, you're wrongly assuming that all of the teachers want to work their summers. There are plenty of teachers who, because of their, whether it be their family's position or just their work ethic and morale, they want the summer off. Like, you're assuming that they want to work all through the summer and just carry on. I don't think that's always the case either.
I haven't met many who do. Kelly, my sister-in-law, tells me how hot the buildings are in August. That they can't. She's an elementary school teacher. They can't let the kids out for recess. They have to do recess inside because the play equipment is so hot it'll burn the kids.
Right.
Now she's one of the good teachers, so they do 2 recesses a day because as we covered on the recess bill to get the wiggles out. But no, she all indications are she's a very, very good teacher and does it for the right reasons. As she told me when she got out of school, when she graduated college, like I was talking about some socioeconomic thing like I do about teaching all that. She goes, I just want to play with kids.
Right. I just want to have fun and love them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, shut up now. This is a good time. Speaking of me shutting up, these are our opinions and not necessarily those of All on Georgia. Whew, this is a good one. And
this is probably the most bizarre story that we will talk about all summer.
And I say a good one. I mean, interesting conversation. Family flees from Georgia DFCS and ultimately sheds light on issues with the system. In January 2015, Coweta County, wife was doing drugs. Husband was drinking a little too much. A fight leads to a 911 call, and eventually DFCS gets called. This is not an unusual story that a neighbor calls after a loud fight, and after, I assume, Coweta County deputies show up as they have DFCS go and check on the family.
Right. Understandably, I don't think anybody refutes that, that should happen in this case.
Right. Yeah. And look, it's we all recognize it's not a healthy environment. Mom and dad are fighting, and especially, and I don't think it says in the story anywhere what drugs she was doing. And I put air quotes around drugs. I mean, I don't know if she was blowing rails of coke or smoking a joint. I have no idea.
Well, I think though that, there are plenty of quote success stories of people who, when DFCS is called on an instance like this, like they get their parenting plan and they turn their lives around and DFCS never has to visit them again. Like, there are plenty of people who, so I just want to say that before we move into the story, because I think there's a misconception that like if a parent's doing drugs or doesn't, there are plenty of parents who are a little bit off the rails and a little bit of accountability or the threat of losing their family is enough to get them on track and on the straight and narrow. So
yeah, it would give somebody an opportunity to step outside themselves a little bit and look in and go, well, you know what, you're right, this is not healthy for the kids.
Right.
And
which I think is what happened in this case initially.
And it sounds like that's what happened. But DFCS made some recommendations with marriage counseling that seemed a little like a little bit of overreach. They asked the wife to go work outside the house for extra income. And
she was a stay-at-home mom, because they had multiple children. 3 kids? 4 kids? I can't remember. 3.
Yeah, and the thing is in what world, I guess if a statist world, is it good for mom to work outside the house versus be there to raise the kids?
Well, and one of the main points of contention in the story is that they felt like they were being treated unfairly because the mom was constantly chastised for not having a job outside the home, but the dad was, not sanctioned, but had like a little ding on his record because he missed a counseling appointment because he had to work. So they weren't, it was like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, please jump through this hoop. Oh my gosh, you jumped through this hoop? Like, we're going to add another punishment, is kind of what they were dealing with.
Yeah, and is this what DFCS should be doing? Now, at no point in this, in reading the story or reading about this couple, do we hear abuse. This is the kids aren't being, we kind of joked about the earlier story about being whooped. The kids aren't being abused.
There was never a safety threat or a safety issue. No imminent threat was ever documented from the story that we can tell. And, I mean, they would have taken him right away because that's what they do.
Yeah, and that's really the crux of the issue is if there is no safety concern, offering resources is great. And if the parents got something for the parenting classes, again, I would much prefer this be at a church and not at the whim of government. But
I think what you're getting at is if there's no threat, why is DFCS involved at all?
Well, exactly. There should be nonprofit resources out there for parenting classes and everything else. I don't think that's a function of government. But that's so far back in the rear view that we're never getting the crap back in that horse.
Right.
But if you're right, if there's no threat, why? What are you doing?
Well, and I really want you to finish the summary of the story. We keep going off on a tangent here, but to the threat aspect, if you think about a domestic violence, like a woman who calls the police or someone who calls the cops because a couple is having to fight and they show up and they ask if there's domestic violence. Like, unless there's an actual threat or a claim, nothing's happening. And they just provide pamphlets and say, well, if you change your mind, here's a pamphlet and some resources and here's a number you can call. They don't just they don't arrest you or take legal action unless there is some sort of safety threat or claim.
Right. So
same thing.
DFCS gets involved, and at some point, and this is going back 4 years that this story is building on. A Cowee County juvenile court judge ordered temporary removal of their children, and their first instinct wasn't to fight but to run, as verbatim out of the story. The picture that we get is the family had limited resources to fight off DFCS. Her quote, Martha, who's the mom, "I'm sure there are going to be people out there who are going to be judgmental and be like, you were stupid. You put their lives in danger. Everyone knows in the back of their minds, if you have children, you would probably do the same thing."
Which I think is fair. A fair assumption. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who would flee or fight because of it. But I think an important part of that is that their kids were ordered to be removed with no evidence, with no testimony, other than a DFCS worker. Like, they had just gone to court in front of this juvenile judge to do a status conference, which usually doesn't have any action. They usually just talk about where they are in the parenting plan, and they just make sure that it's basically like a welfare check, but it's in court. And their attorney had just withdrawn from their case, so they had 2 days before. They got a new attorney, but the new attorney couldn't appear on 2 days' notice, and so they went thinking that they would just get a continuance. The judge said no. A guardian ad litem who is appointed to represent the kids and, advocate on their behalf said they've missed a little bit of school, but there's no safety threat and the plan is being followed. That is clear. And the judge said to the DFCS worker, do you think that there's an issue here? Do you think there's an imminent danger? The DFCS worker says yes. The judge says, okay, they need to be removed and we'll set a hearing for a later date. Without any evidence, without any testimony, without any, anything else, this DFCS worker's word is enough to get these kids taken from their home.
And the tough thing on this is we want there to be a function to get children who are in imminent danger away from a threat. That the ability to remove the children from the home or remove a parent from the home, whatever it takes, and then let legal proceedings fall where they may. But this was not 2:00 in the morning at the house and no one knows what's going on. Let's get the kids out and get them safe. This was a court hearing that was a status update, and it sure does seem like, because Patrick is the husband, I believe, didn't have a law degree, that he got procedured. They procedured his butt right out of court.
Well, and I think another thing that people forget about is everyone thinks the system works great, and if you just tell the truth, and if you're just honest, and you just show up, that everything will work in your favor. Everyone thinks that until they show up and tell the truth, and they take your damn kids away, or they throw you in jail for a crime you didn't commit, or, you lose. There's all kinds of things that the courts can take from you with really no evidence at all. So I think that a lot of their, of course they're able to reflect on it now and say that it wasn't a smart decision, but other people would do it too. But you're also talking about people who have previously done everything that the courts told them to do, and their kids got taken anyway.
Right. So they run. At this point, they decide that we're going to keep our family together. We're going to run. They end up crashing in, and this is very Georgia, a friend's trailer, if I'm recalling the story correctly.
That's right.
And the door gets beaten in because there's warrants issued for their arrest.
Amber alerts.
They
everything.
They're accused of kidnapping their own kids. Mom and dad are charged with kidnapping the kids away from the state. So the way he put it, is maybe a bit of hyperbole, but he said there was a laser on everybody's head, including their 11-year-old. When the I assume GBI agents came in to. It
was the marshals.
The marshals came in to, putting air quotes around, rescue their children. That's the hand of government. I mean, I have a picture in my head of Alien Gonzalez being ripped out of his I think it was his aunt's arms in Miami in whatever year it was, 95, 94, whatever it was, beating the door down to rip their children away, to force them to go to court, when at no point was there ever... There was more threat to those children's lives when there were guns pointed everywhere than there ever were with mom and dad arguing.
Right. And they did it with no testimony or proof. That's what's so frightening. I mean, what you're talking about is absolutely terrifying, and you're right about the imminent threat, but my God, they did it without having there was no burden on the state to prove anything.
And then we get into the area of the story where your buddy gets involved. Chris Carr's office is appealing to the Supreme Court to support the actions here. Appeals court judge sides with the parents. Judge uses a great line, a couple of them here. Constitutional rights are amendments, not suggestions. Called it nonsense on stilts, which that's going to be a new one in my vocabulary, in my vernacular, and nonsense on stilts. Declaring parenting to be a fiercely guarded right that should be infringed upon only under the most compelling circumstances. And the story could end there, and we could pack it up and go home. But the Attorney General of the state of Georgia is taking it to the Georgia Supreme Court to argue for the state removing these children.
Right, because keep in mind that when they're not wasting everybody's time pretending like they enforce Georgia's sunshine laws, the Attorney General's job is to represent state agencies. If you call and ask for help, they're going to be like, we're sorry, we don't represent the people of Georgia. We represent the state. We represent state agencies. It's obnoxious, but it's true. So their role is to defend DFCS's position, and they weren't willing to back up on this despite not just a ruling from a court, but almost a tongue lashing in the opinion.
Nonsense on stilts.
Yes. And to date, they've spent 450 hours defending DFCS in this case alone. And that doesn't even count. They hired a private attorney to come in and also assist. So 450 hours to say we were right to take these kids and we were right for this order and our testimony should stand in court when there's still no imminent threat, and you've made criminals out of parents who had made some poor decisions but were clearly, and it was people were testifying that they were remedying the situation.
And with evidence to the contrary, they took one person's word. That right. By the time that this order comes in, we have more than 12 months of them doing checkups and coming in for their status updates with the court, doing all the stuff they're supposed to be doing. We have evidence of their behavior coming up to this point where the judge orders the removal of these children. And you and I are experts on parenting, having none between us.
Well, sitting on the sidelines allows you to see things much clearer. So
it does. That's why some of the best head coaches in football go to the press box or go to the box to see it. That way they can see the whole game and they're not involved in the little picture. And we have the show that we're raising. But
of course,
it's when you get that sort of tongue lashing and the Attorney General doesn't go, okay, well, let's just go ahead and call that one a loss and move on to the next one. He's going to double down. He's going to spend $1 million and still lose, because I don't see the Georgia Supreme Court overruling this appeals judge. I mean, it was so damning the way it was written that there's. I can't see them overturning it and saying, yes, the government was right. And I guess
for what? And for what? Like, what will that do? Because at this point, when the appeals court did what they did with their ruling, it struck the criminal aspect from their records, which undid allowed the children to be placed back in the home.
Well, here's the thing. Is this family that's already struggling to the point where DFCS says, hey, chick, get out, get a job. This family's already struggling to make ends meet. And they're going to put this legal burden on them to pay lawyers to go argue before the Georgia Supreme Court. It is
what?
It is a heinous, vile action by the state to take advantage of those who have the least.
And for nothing. For no reason at all.
And hell, by the time the case is adjudicated, the kid's probably going to be graduated out of high school. So what we need to do is everybody chip in a little bit of money and hire David Ralston, and that way they'll never have to go to court.
There you go. I mean, it's disgusting, though, and especially in my area, there was a huge case that I'm sure a lot of people heard about, but there's a case down here in Effingham County where basically DFCS dropped the ball, and 2 children were found buried in their own backyard by their parents, and they were a homeschool family and all this stuff. But you hear all these stories about times where DFCS didn't follow up and didn't follow through when there were visible bruises, and when teachers were saying the kid doesn't act right, or I've seen things, or I've heard things, and the kids have testimony that they tell a DFCS worker in private, and you have all of this stuff, but then, and the system fails those kids, and they end up dead, or they end up, malnourished and starving and in a hospital. But then you see cases like this, where now you have an 11-year-old who's terrified of the state, who thinks that DFCS is a nasty agency, whose parents were criminalized for doing what they were supposed to do, and Lord only knows how much this has cost them.
Everything.
From everything, from work, from benefits. Like, let's say that they were receiving, WIC or something. Like, certain things disallow you from being able to claim those benefits. There's so many things that could have been impacted. And this is what they choose to take to the Supreme Court. Yet there's a case going through the courts right now where the DFCS workers didn't properly screen some foster parents, and a 2-year-old ended up dead, all because they were too lazy to check a maiden name. Like, how does this get as far as it has gotten, but all of these other cases we hear about fall through the cracks?
Right. And, this smacks of government that doesn't want to lose. That's after that ruling, Chris Carr should have gone home to lick his wounds, go pick another fight, but instead they're gonna continue to go after this poor family. And I mean that in every sense of the word, that poor them, and they're not affluent. Fighting the state is expensive.
And they made a mistake, and they got caught, and they tried to be held accountable for it and adhere to the standards, and that wasn't good enough. And my question is, if adhering to the standards is not good enough, then why not just take the kids up front and say, you know what, we don't want you to have your kid. Like, why put them through all of this if you're just going to take them anyway, because the standards and the hurdles you make them jump over are just too great for anyone to reach? Well,
and, I've got a friend who works for DFCS, and I was talking to him about being in a house, and the house stunk of weed. Like, I was like, and I wasn't reporting them. I was just asking. I said, "What do you do in that sort of situation?" Because, well, it's up to the person that's there at the time, but in the back of your mind, you have to ask yourself: is there an imminent threat, or are they better off staying in the home and not being put into the system? And the system, the system's a horrible place for a kid to be thrown. It's not, when the state takes you away from everything it's terrifying, and the should only be done to protect the life and limb of children, and that's not what happened here. That they didn't adhere to that standard that you have to kind of evaluate whether the system is better.
Well, and I think a lot of people forget or dismiss that even if in these rare cases where it's better for parents to have their kids removed from the home, even if they're going to be better off, it is traumatic for everyone. It is devastating. And even if it's only temporary, the effects go well beyond the time that the child is not with their parents or is in a foster home or whatever. I mean, those impacts last forever.
They do. And I'm married to an orphan who lost both her parents within 18 months.
Wow.
The foster. I'm sure it's better now, but that for a child is awful. It is the last thing that should be done.
And it shouldn't be used as punishment. It should be used to save children.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's not a taking your kids is not a punishment the state should be handing down.
No, this case is disgusting, and I hope when it's all said and done, they sue.
They can't.
They can sue in federal court.
That's true.
And I hope they do.
And win. As much as I hate that as a taxpayer in the state of Georgia, but
it's our insurance policies, whatever.
Our insurance policy, whatever. Well, that all goes into it, Jessica.
Well, I know our insurance rates will go up, but I get that. But I mean, like, it's not like dollar for dollar. Like, it's not like it's coming out of the state coffers or anybody's actually being held accountable. It's total horse. But I don't have time to get into that. We're running late.
It is. And here's the thing, is that there needs to be punitive damages from the state. The state needs to learn a lesson. Of course, they don't.
No. They're probably running simultaneous cases like this somewhere else, too, that the people just haven't made it to the media or don't know how or don't have the resources or don't understand they're being wronged. Right.
So that's... It's not like I would learn my lesson. I would... If you smacked me with a lawsuit because I did something wrong, I might learn my lesson. Government doesn't.
Well, why would they? They're just... No one in this case has been... There's no reprimand by DFCS internally. They filed a complaint against the judge who did this there with the JQC. There was no punishment. There wasn't even anything beyond like an investigation. Nothing, no hearing on it, nothing. So why bother?
Right. Well, the thing is Carr should be held accountable for his office and pushing this forward. The fact is that he'll continue on. He's got an R after his name. He'll be just fine. Ugh. And you know this to be true.
I know.
We know that with the insurance commissioner. We ended up with a turd because he put an R after his name.
Yes, but at least now he's a federally indicted turd.
Still making a salary.
Yeah.
He still has the insurance that which was the reason he gave for not quitting his job.
Yeah, which is nice. I'd love that he can be indicted on federal charges and keep his insurance, but you know his insurance policies and the person he succeeded, his policies are the reason that I can't even get insurance in my county. But you know, carry on, assholes.
Spicy today.
Just.
And here, I didn't think we'd have an hour's worth of content.
Well, you're welcome.
You want to move on to closing thoughts?
Sure. So, also this week in stupidity, this is one that I just have tried, and I just can't wrap my mind around it. The Virginia Republican Party tried to censure one of their congressmen, I believe, maybe a week or so ago. They wanted to reprimand Congressman Denver Riggleman, which, what a name. I mean, what a name. Denver Riggleman. He's from the 5th Congressional District. They held a closed session to discuss reprimanding him because he officiated a gay couple's wedding. And they felt like it went against the platform that they tout traditional marriage, and went on to put out a public statement that said children raised in a two-parent household tend to be physically and emotionally healthier, more likely to do well in school, less likely to use drugs and alcohol, engage in crime, or become pregnant outside of marriage. So, and they said all this statement with a statement about how they welcome anyone gay or straight into the party. They just don't support them getting married. So I honestly don't know where to start with these clowns. Obviously, we can all say all day long that, you know, the state has no business being in marriage, but they are. And so this is what the Republican Party, this is why they are irrelevant. This is why nobody gives a damn what they're doing, because you can vote to increase the debt, you can vote to restrict our liberties, you can vote to expand the size of government, you can do all of these things, but if off the clock on your weekend you go and officiate a gay wedding, I'll be damned, they're going to come and censure your butt. It didn't pass, but they tried to censure a man for officiating a wedding in his free time, because it didn't match the platform.
What platform?
The Republican
platform. No, I get it. The argument is settled. SCOTUS has spoken. I mean...
Sure. And another aspect, they, you know, in their official statement about the two-parent household, I'm sorry, I think that's almost as offensive as what they tried to do in censuring him for officiating the wedding, because you're implying, whether you agree with it or not, if you have a same-sex couple, they're both raising the kids. They do have two parents. They're just opposite. They're not opposite sex like you Republicans want them to be. It is probably the most obnoxious story of the week, and I hope that all of them lose their party seats. It's why I oppose political parties, because it's so stupid. What a colossal waste of time.
And if you're trying to be inclusive, you're trying to have the log cabin Republicans and everything else, is you want to bring small government-minded people, and everyone I speak to generally will agree that government is a problem. So if Republicans frame the conversation from getting government out of your lifestyle, it goes back to the whole thing. Get Democrats out of my wallet and Republicans out of the bedroom.
Here's the thing. I don't care if you're elected and you are doing hookers and blow on your weekends, and on your evenings you gamble. I don't care. I don't care if you I don't care what you eat. I don't care where you go. I don't care how you spend your money. I care how you vote. You don't represent me like as a society or as a human. You represent me in elected office, and you're impacting my values. So represent my values. I don't care what you do in your free time, and I will not join a political party that does.
It's absolutely amazing to me that in 2019, at this point, we're years into the ruling from SCOTUS. Years into it. It's done. It's settled. I agreed with the outcome of the ruling. I didn't agree on the reasoning. But the fact is, it's done. Why in the world would you go and poke the damn bear, so to speak? Why would you poke the bear on this one? It's done. It's settled. The gay marriage debate is settled. Why would you go and bring all that up and try to charge your opposition and show off what kind of bigot you can be?
Be a decent human. And focus on what they're doing in elected office. How are they using their platform? It's not like this. And it's not even like this guy was up there saying, not as, what is it? What do they call it? Like as the power invested in me, and as, he's not saying like as the fifth congressional district representative, I now pronounce you husband and husband. He wasn't trying to do anything with under the guise of his name. I've seen people do way worse with their title and everything. And this is what they choose to go after. I have no respect for it. I think they're a bunch of bumbling idiots.
And it does nothing but take the party backwards.
Yep.
Backwards.
And rightfully so at this point. They deserve it.
So that's it's hard. It really is hard when you're trying to tell people that I'm a small government fiscal hawk. Then you get tied in with dipshits like that who want to censure somebody for officiating a wedding on his free time.
Yes.
I mean, I wish they would do more weddings and a lot less laws.
Sure.
At least the taxpayers of this country were safe while he was going to doing that. I should have gone first with my closing thought.
Yeah, well, it's been a while since I yelled, so... Oh, by the way, tell them to get back in their box. But...
Yeah, yes, and Republicans get back in your box. I'm not sure we should say that with gay wedding. Don't go to social media for help. I saw a picture of a minnow that someone got at the beach. Their daughter. What type of fish is it? There were 20 answers. 18 of them were wrong. With just wrong. Just so that is the most awful place to go for any sort of earnest advice. Use Facebook for what it's meant for: jokes and fishing photos.
Cat memes.
Yes.
And reading allongeorgia.com.
And allongeorgia.com. And reading through Jessica's followers' replies to any of her stories, which is, is awesome.
Yeah,
So,
Dave's already told everybody that it's better than my writing. The comments are better, so you don't even have to click the articles, just read the comments, apparently.
Oh, no, you get banished from your page if you don't read the article before commenting.
This is true.
So, for Jessica Salachi, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.